What has always been your fun fact when asked? A shotgun's barrel will break if it's fired partially underwater, at least with buckshot. It'll break wherever the waterline is. It's the compression of gases, so it wouldn't matter if it was buckshot or even a blank. So would any of you out there, never, ever fire a firearm partially submerged, because what you have made is a bomb. Shotguns are actually low-pressure weapons with thick barrels, so that probably makes them not as dangerous as, say, a rifle. If you want to see what happens to a shotgun, go to Demolition Ranch on YT. Keep in mind, less dangerous still means capable of blowing a gun barrel apart like a banana peel. Albatrosses can sleep when they fly. Car drivers too. A woman once jumped off the 86th floor of the Empire State Building, but the wind pushed her back, and she fell on a ledge on the 85th floor. She survived. Woman, goodbye cruel world. I'm taking things into my own hands. God, no. God, looking down. Accept it. Jump to it. Destiny denies you all the same. Or should I say, I do. Wyoming only has 2 escalators. I find this hard to believe. Can you elaborate? How can you be sure? Shuffles several escalators into a bag and prepares for a road trip. Now that I think about it, escalators are pretty rare, aren't they? I mean, at least as far as the settings you'd realistically see one. You've got multi-story malls, some government buildings, large airports, subways, and maybe the odd multi-story hotel lobby. I guess I could imagine a small, low-density state not having many places that actually require one. Dragonflies have the highest successful kill rate of any creature on Earth. They also live for several years as underwater naiad bugs and only a short time as the full-grown dragonfly. And if those underwater naiad bugs were the size of, say, a dog, they'd be as scary as anything on the planet. They're vicious little. Play-Doh was originally designed to remove soup from wallpaper. The only reason it became a toy was because vinyl wallpaper became a thing, making his product obsolete. The creator needed to save the company and accidentally found that kids loved the stuff. After making it safe to play with, it was then marketed for kids. In a similar vein, Silly Putty was invented as an attempt at a synthetic rubber substitute, as the natural material had become scarce during World War II. However, the new substance did not have the properties necessary for that purpose, and was only picked up as a potential toy concept by chance. Also, the reusable low-tack glue on Post-it notes originated as a failed creation in experiments, attempting to develop a super strong adhesive, and its inventor was initially so disappointed in the result that he nearly threw out the formula. Didn't the Post-it guy only realize the potential when someone complained about bookmarks falling out or something? I think I heard that from an old 3M employee, but not sure if it's a true story or just added to the mythology. If ancient Egyptians got divorced, they would throw a massive party and invite everyone they knew to celebrate how close they all were to each other. Before bears hibernate, they eat a bunch of twigs and grass to plug up their butts so that they don't have to wake up in the middle of the winter too. Then when they do wake up in the spring, they have these really rough, massive, and the plug is called a tapin. Tapin dat? During World War II, when they took over France, the French government had the elevator in the Eiffel Tower destroyed, so if Hitler wanted to plant a flag on top of the tower, he would have to take the stairs to the top. That is the most French thing I have ever heard. Masters of passive aggressivity. Ants can enslave their neighboring ants, and once the slave ants get fed up with they rebel against their masters in a bloody winner-takes-all deathmatch, and the survivors repopulate the colony with help of their queens. I just saved this big ant in battle with smaller ants in my backyard. I'd been sitting there watching it valiantly fighting but outnumbered. So I played the role of the Deus Ex Machina and relocated the foreign ant to a different spot, farther away. It came back for round 2 and I didn't intervene in its free will that time. You prevented an honorable battle to glorious death in her entry into the burrows of Anthala, you monster. The reason why it is the top 40 is that jukeboxes could fit 40 records, and the owners would use the top 40 list as a way to know which records to buy. Also, fun fact, Billboard magazine used to be a trade magazine for advertising, which in those days was most often literal billboards. Since sales in the new recording industry were heavily influenced by advertising, they created metrics for monitoring it. They split off the music section as a separate publication when it got huge, and today that's all they do. William Henry Harrison gave the longest U.S. presidential inauguration speech but served the shortest term of 1 month before dying in office. He also refused to wear an overcoat and died of pneumonia. So these two facts are no doubt linked. There's been some relatively recent analysis that concludes that the president probably died from septic shock instead of being out in the rain. The White House water supply was from the same body of water that was the public sewage outlet. Giraffes are the only animals born with horns. Other animals grow horns when they are older, and giraffe horns are actually floppy when they're very young. I'm glad to hear that. I was feeling very sorry for the mama giraffes. Rabbits grind their teeth in happiness similar to how cats purr when they're content. It would take 1,200,000 mosquitoes, each sucking once, to completely drain the average human of blood. I'm not sure this is fun to me. One symptom of scurvy is that old scars reopen and form wounds again as scar tissue degrades from the vitamin C deficiency. That's terrifying. Ever seen a pet bird trying to pull their owner's jewelry out, away from them? It can be annoying and painful, but it's actually a sign of affection. They think the owner has things stuck in their feathers and are trying to preen, groom them, or because they are government drones trying to acquire wealth. Despite being a Class B substance, the UK is the world's largest exporter of legal cannabis. The former drug minister's husband owns the world's largest legal indoor cannabis farm in the UK. Why it will never be legal in the UK? A politician will lose too much money. Tim Burton's inspiration for The Nightmare Before Christmas was seeing retail stores setting up their Christmas displays before Halloween had finished. Piggybacking onto this, The Nightmare Before Christmas was not directed by Tim Burton. It was directed by Henry Selick. I always thought James and the Giant Peach was by Tim Burton as a kid, but it's actually by Henry Selick. I think Tim Burton served as a producer or consultant on it though. A second is called a second because it is the second division of the hour by 60, the first division being a minute. This is also one of my favorite tidbits because I enjoy linguistics. To those confused, let me expand. The first small part in Latin is pars minuta prima, hence minute. The second small part in Latin is pars minuta secunda, hence second. I might have conjugated that wrong, but you get the idea. My favorite bit of linguistic fact is the word bishop, though. In Greek, epi equals over, and skopos equals look. So, episkopos was an overseer of sorts. Drop the e at the start and the os at the end, and you get piskop. Look familiar? Fiddle with the p and the k a little bit and you can easily turn them into a, b, and an h. Episkopos and gt, piskop and gt, piskop and gt, bishop. So, a bishop is just an overseer. Edit to the Dutch Germans, South Africans. I am now fully aware that piskop means head. You don't need to keep telling me. Episcopalian makes much more sense with this etymology. I always go for Le Royale or the time that French people had surgery as a fashion statement. In early 1685, King Louis XIV of France developed a fistula, fistulae, for anyone who haven't yet had the pleasure, hurt like a. In Louis's case, he couldn't sit, couldn't ride a horse, couldn't do much of anything except lie down with his in the air like the opening to a pre-revolutionary porno. The previous treatment and poultices did absolutely nothing. Louis eventually had enough and decided he wanted to try surgery. Unfortunately for Louis, a surgical option didn't exist, and so he hired a surgeon barber named and asked him to fix him. Not entirely stupid, and not willing to risk up a novel surgery on the King of France, Felix requested 6 months to practice, which he did on prisoners. Live prisoners. Live, healthy prisoners. In an era where antiseptics and anesthetics didn't exist, the success rates were about as you'd imagine, although at least some of the prisoners survived, and eventually Felix felt confident enough to perform the surgery on the king. It was, somewhat surprisingly, a complete success, and within 3 months Louis was riding around as good as new. In that 3 months, however, he had to wear bandages around his and, as is so often the case, whatever the rich and powerful do, other people mimic. Perfectly healthy French nobles paid Felix absurd amounts of money to go under the knife themselves, fixing fistulae that weren't even there, just so they could get in on this latest fad. And those who couldn't afford it, or who weren't willing to have surgery in the name of fashion, would fake it, wearing bloody bandages and claiming that they'd suffered the same ailment. These bandages were known as, which is worth remembering anytime you feel the urge to complain about modern fashion trends. God, I had fistula surgery 2 years ago, and even with modern medicine it was a horrible experience. I cannot imagine how awful it would have been back then. Of course I would have been super fashionable with my bandages I wore for 2 months. Almost exactly 90 years ago, Pluto was discovered. Since its discovery, it has not completed a single orbit around the Sun. In fact, it's only gone about 1/3 road of the way around in all that time. Pluto really the bed on this one. It's just taking its time. The oldest "your mom" joke was discovered on a 3,500-year-old Babylonian tablet. Don't leave us hanging here. A giraffe has the same number of bones in their neck as humans. I knew giraffes had 7 bones in their neck, but I didn't realize they managed to fit 7 humans in there too. Cheetahs can sprint for about 17 seconds straight. After that they have to stop because they generate so much heat from the exertion that if they continued running they would literally cook their own brains. This is why humans are the best runners in the animal kingdom. We are nowhere near the fastest, but we have ability to dissipate body heat efficiently. So whereas most animals can only run for a few minutes to maybe a few of hours, a human in peak physical condition can run for days. Shout out Forrest Gump. The reason that Chicago Daily Tribune called the election for Dewey instead of Truman, who easily won, was because they did a telephone poll in 1948. Just straight up rang people up and asked them if they voted for Dewey or Truman. Obviously only the wealthier people had telephones, and FDR was still incredibly popular with everyone except wealthy people or people who thought they were wealthy. Today telephone polls are normal but skewing older, but not in 1948. Editing for Source and GT. The committee suggested that pollsters had relied on unscientific methods. At the time, commercial polling firms like Gallup and Roper all did quota sampling. Interviewers sought out certain quotas of respondents, such as male or female, young or old, within set geographical areas. But because how they selected those respondents was largely up to them, interviewers might, for example, go mainly to affluent neighborhoods, excluding poor and middle-class residents and biasing the results. And GT. The hard look at sampling that resulted from Truman's unexpected win was a turning point in survey methodology. Writing in 1998, Humphrey Taylor, head of polling firm Lewis Harris and Asik, declared, "Virtually all public opinion surveys conducted in the United States since then, whether conducted face-to-face or by telephone, have used some modified version of probability sampling. Indeed, for American researchers, quota sampling is almost a dirty phrase. So it turns out they used both bad polling methods and small sample sizes, and because the wealthy were easier to reach they got more of those in their sample. It really and because Truman stopped by St. Louis on his way to D.C. he got his hands on a copy of the Chicago Tribune. Anyway, it was a good thing for political polling because newspapers took random sampling much more seriously, which wasn't a new concept.